Power-ups, power-ups, power-ups. The staple in any battle shonen, and the moment where a character receives a monumental increase in power which drastically changes the outcome of the situation. When addressing power-ups, there are three things that come to mind to what makes them great. 1. Setup. What are the steps taken to achieve this power-up? Was it done through foreshadowing? Was it built up towards the actions surrounding their character arc? And it's an important factor to how the power-up is presented. 2. Execution. The moment the power-up lands and presented to the audience is super important. When you look back to the key moments surrounding it, there's always one moment in particular that catches your eye. For example, Gohan going Super Saiyan 2, the bird to the snap, is a moment that replays in your head again and again. 3. Why you like it. Honestly, it's the most important aspect, but it all boils down to subjectivity. A power-up can be written perfectly, but if you don't like it yourself, what is the point in all of it? I will go into depth on these three criteria and explain why I love Yuji Itadori's power-up. But it's important to note that all power-ups aren't built the same. Some of my favourite power-ups are transformations. For example, Super Saiyan and Mugetsu, where physical change and the narrative build-up across the entire arcs provide a feeling like no other. There's also mental power-ups, where there's distinctive change in the character's psyche, which serve as an evolution of their character arc. Yuji is a great example of this, and other examples such as Kaneki post-torture from Jason. We then have the third aspect, where the power-up is a combination of a drastic physical and mental shift, and a perfect example of this is Gon's power-up, which builds up on the entire body of Hunter x Hunter and perfectly builds up on his character arc. The final power-up I want to touch on, which is normally left out, is a simple moveset addition. This is also integral to the character Yuji and fits this description perfectly, but one I honestly loved ever since I was young was Naruto learning the Rasengan. The build up to how difficult the technique is, to him cementing his ninja way, and instilling confidence back into Tsunade for her to keep believing again. It's honestly one of my favourite showcase of how a simple power up can add so much to the themes of the story. But now I've showcased different ideas of the concept of a power up. What makes Yuji Itadori's power up so special? Well, first, we start with the setup. One thing Gege doesn't get enough credit for is how meticulous Jujutsu Kaisen is. From as early as chapter 1, you can connect the dots to reveals, which really puts everything into context. But before that, we have to establish how power works in Jujutsu Kaisen. First, Jujutsu Sorcerer is inherently capped on your potential from birth, with 80% of your Jujutsu sorcery is innate talent. The second established rule is that Jujutsu power-ups aren't necessarily linear, but can happen in the midst of the moment, and we have numerous examples in this series for this. But in the case of Yuji, his power-up falls nicely in the confines set for this series. But with the idea of setup, the main thing people want to know is why now? Well, the removing of Sukuna from his body has seen as a key catalyst to this sudden awakening. From the initial chapter, Sukuna was shocked at his increase in strength, and with additional information to Yuji's entire creation, with the sealing of a Sukuna finger, it makes a lot of sense. In the first ever chapter when Megumi walks past Yuji, he assumes it's the residuals from the box. While with the added context, it could be some insane foreshadowing to tell us that Yuji was the original finger, which shows how much planning this power-up has had. In addition, Kenjaku breaking the seal in Shibuya, of all the people who ingested the cursed object, should work the same with Yuji, which serves as a key moment narratively and for his own individual arc. The fact his true power came once Sukuna left his body and then hitting a black flash, all the pieces begin to fall in place. Not to mention, the use of Black Flash to further that evolution seems like the cherry on the top, to keep within the confines of the series and awakenings through the Black Sparks. But before that, we have to talk about the concept of Black Flash. All the way back in Goodwill, Todo explained it as a mechanism that Sorcerer's understanding of cursed energy will multiply by magnitude, and it was the first time Yuji was truly aware of his cursed energy. Not to mention, it used the kitchen motif, and with our current information of Sukuna's curse technique and the cooking motif set aside with it, which sets up for some very interesting things because it was an explanation of Yuji finally seeing his cursed energy, and this was for the first time, and it nicely relates to his awakening of Shrine. Black Flash is a way a sorcerer can grow exponentially, and we have numerous examples in the series. The particular one I want to cover is Mahito and his concept of I am you, and even the drastic change in their powers replicating each other. Mahito over the course of Shibuya had 2 black flashes. Each one were used to give him a significant power up in one shape or form. The first one served as a catalyst for the 0.2 domain, which led to him shortening the 2-step process to copy a move he saw once from Gojo Satoru. Not to mention, at this point of time, he was close to finding out the true shape of his unbridled soul, and with the second black flash post domain, it led him to define the truest form of his soul. In the realm of Yuji, it has only took 1 black flash for him to awaken, with every character we've seen on the series have pretty much learnt something or gained an increase in strength from black flash. The concept of I am you, and Yuji gaining the true powers from the curse technique etched onto his body, and Mahito receiving a true understanding of the soul works so well. This also sets up for the next stage of his awakening, which could be a domain expansion and potential third technique. Now why do I say that? Well, this entire arc has focused on Yuji's ability to hit the soul. Sukuna also commented that just being sealed with a finger doesn't explain his total strength, foreshadowing more to come. The concept of an innate domain being called the heart sets up for blood manipulation, plus his initial understanding of the soul and learning barriers for Kusakabe for him to build up on the domain expansion, constantly laying the seeds for his awakening. When Choso explained how to use blood manipulation to feel through entire parts of his body, it seems as a great setup for him to gaining a deeper understanding of the confines of his soul and body, really building up on the conflict with Mahito. Not to mention that the 3 characters bar Yuki who have a greater understanding of the soul, being Sukuna, Yuji and Mahito, work so well. This will be boosted by the constant use of Black Flash to bring a bigger awakening. And it's also shown with him being able to hit Black Flashes in between the space of Megami and Sukuna's soul, already laying the groundwork. But the concept of Kenjaku having another impact on why he's strong, a similar principle of awakening, anti-gravity, could be at the works, or a technique we aren't currently aware of. Honestly, we'd have to wait till we learn more of Yuji Itadori's origins. The most important aspect is the setup for Yuji's awakening has been built up through every facet in the story and why the power-up feels so deserved. The last moment, which also sets up nicely for Megami, is the Sukuna stimulus package. Being in Sukuna's body has given him access to special grade usage, which combined with his already prodigy abilities, he has been the fastest power increase we've seen since the beginning of the series, adding an even greater layer to Kenjaku's potential need for him being Sukuna's vessel. Now, setting up a power-up is all good and well, but if the execution doesn't hit, you lose some of the beauty of why people love power-ups. In the case of Yuji, the execution is very important and is aligned with how Jujutsu Kaisen executes increases in power. Sudden, in the moment, and a drastic increase of strength. You can pretty much use every example in the series, and it boils down to the core values of the series. In Yuji's case, it was exactly that. But what I loved more about this version is the lore at the beginning, which recontextualizes everything in the series. The opening panel of Sukuna explaining his twin soul was in Limba, and Yuji was sealed with the original finger. To the moment that will stay in JJK fans forever. Within Yuji lies a latent potential equal to Sukuna. Those few words put everything into context and makes you appreciate the earliest parts of the series. His freakish rate of growth, why there were so many similarities with Yuji and Sukuna. Staying true to the Nihon Shoki lore but adding his own twist, which now brings a bigger purpose to Kenjaku and Jin Itadori. The way of presenting of the awakening to the audience with significant lore that adds another dimension to the series and setting up a true mini 1v1 clash with Sukuna. Granted, Ina was there for support, but the bulk of the chapter was focused on them two going back and forth. Not to mention he hit numerous black flashes straight after, and the most important aspect was the visualization of his curse technique. We already know from the fanbook that curse techniques can evolve, and the best example of that is projection sorcery. It could also explain other users such as Reggie having receipts, so that's a good alleyway to why Yuji's interpretation is scissors. But I want to cover a little bit more than that, because curse techniques also characterize the user, so what could be the reason Yuji having scissors? Well, let's compare their natures. Sukuna is characterized as a calamity, so his visualization being violent of divine flames, cleave and dismantle, it fits his nature perfectly. But with Yuji being a nice childish guy, him having scissors, and specifically even having an element of safety scissors guide on where to cut, is very reflective of his nature. Him thinking of where to cut in comparison to Sukuna's overwhelming destruction is a great fit. Yuji wouldn't want his attacks to have any effects on others, which sets up nicely for how the further interpretation for the rest of Shrine could work. To take it to a step further, it could relate to his dependency on others having a literal guide for his attacks, and the constant reliance on others in battles or teaching moments. It really does fit Yuji's character very well, and the big reason why I enjoy his interpretation of the technique. The final aspect to tackle in execution is it doesn't make sense in the confines in the series. Currently, a huge increase in power is generally met with a selfish mindset, but there's two avenues that can come from this in regards to this Yuji power. I touched about it a lot more detail in this video, so I'll definitely recommend. While to touch briefly, I do think his mindset to just end Sukuna has put him on a more focused mindset than ever before. He isn't fully far from his Cog mindset, but his actions, eating his brothers, his overwhelming fortitude from key deaths such as Gojo and Higuruma, is a lot more locked in than ever before and more focused on his goal. But I don't want to repeat too much on what that video said, so I'll also offer a fresh perspective. For the first time in 248, Sukuna questioned himself and had to reconvince himself and come to the conclusion to eat their ideals. The first person to do that was Mahito, where they wanted to prove the other person's ideals were wrong. We saw the conclusion it came to him, so that could set up for the shift in the story for Sukuna's ideas to eventually lose its impact on the story, depending on the route Gege goes. My initial thought process is Yuji will take inspiration for Sukuna and it will end up having the inverse of character arcs. But what if Gege disproves his mindset, with Yuji being able to retain who he is and still be able to match Sukuna, which will add another layer to his dislike for Yuji. Without disregarding anything, he'd provide a different alleyway which could be a part of a thematic execution Yuji's character arc could go. But these are all speculation. With my personal idea with JJK ending will be bittersweet, I don't think Gege will 100% commit to that thought process. There's also the conversation on whether Sukuna will lose in Shinjuku, but that's a conversation for another day. This, in my opinion, is how the execution of his awakening still fits to the thematic avenues within Jujutsu Kaisen. Now the final and most important aspect. Do you like the power-up? As a huge Yuji fan, a character who's moved me all the way from his introduction, nobody can say this hasn't been deserved. To see him generally do significant damage to Sukuna, and I really don't care how weakened he is, it's so satisfying to see him leave an impact and build up through all the trials and tribulations he's had throughout the manga. Not to mention his goal beyond ending Sukuna is to still save Megumi, and even in these clutch moments, he stayed true to his goal and finally set the foundation for his curse technique to be developed, and I just feel great. And honestly, that is all you need. I think nowadays metrics to gauge things are a little too much, and we lose the fundamental things of enjoying yourself. Does it make you happy, excited, hyped to see more? It checks all those 3 boxes for me, and is why I love the power-up, and even if we are just touching the surface. With Jujutsu Kaisen, in my personal opinion, still have a decent amount of time to go with no final arc announcement, the potential to see how his curse technique can develop, the further reveals on his power-up, will Gege keep in line with Yuji's initial wishes of wanting a power bomb, thunder and explosion, or will we get a different application of Shrine that befits Yuji's nature? Will he awaken another curse technique that is reliant on his origins? It gave us so much information and opened up so many questions just as much. But also setting up some great stuff for one of my other favourite characters, Megumi, is a big reason why I rate this series so much. Overall, I love Yuji Itadori's power up, and the fact we're only at the surface, Yuji Itadori truly will end up a monster.